Think about the last time you pulled into a strip mall or a shopping center out of habit. Not for a big trip, just a quick stop, a prescription, a greeting card, a pair of sneakers for your kid. You probably didn't think much about it. Those stores were just there. They were always there. Some of them won't be next year. And here is what makes 2026 different from the retail shakeouts you have heard about before. This is not one type of store in one corner of the economy. This year, the closures are coming from pharmacies, grocery chains, department stores, outdoor retailers, children's clothing brands, and luxury boutiques all at once. That breadth is the signal. When it is only one sector struggling, it is a sector problem. When it is this many sectors at the same time, something larger is shifting underneath. According to analysis from the retail advisory group Coresight Research, roughly 7,900 U.S. stores are expected to close in 2026. More than 1,200 closures had already been publicly announced by early in the year, and that number is expected to grow. These are not just stragglers. Several are brands that were considered stable or even growing just 2 or 3 years ago. This video walks through 10 of the most significant ones, not as a list of bad news, but as a map of what is actually happening in American retail and in American daily life. Because behind every one of these closures, there is a reason that goes deeper than just people are shopping online now. Let's start at number 10. Number 10. Francesca's. You probably remember walking past a Francesca's. The store always looked like someone had decorated it for a very specific type of Saturday afternoon soft lighting. Jewelry near the entrance, blouses on wooden hangers, a little bit of everything for not very much money. It felt personal in a way that bigger chains did not. For millions of women across the country, it was a reliable pit stop in the middle of a mall. By 2026, according to reports, Francesca's is completing the closure of its entire U.S. store fleet, roughly 400 locations. The company had filed for bankruptcy protection in 2020, and despite attempts to restructure and survive, the math, ultimately, did not work. Here is what makes this more than just a business failure. Francesca's was never trying to be a luxury retailer or a fast fashion giant. It lived in the middle, affordable, curated, approachable, and that middle is where American retail has become almost impossible to sustain. Customers in that bracket are being pulled in two directions, toward ultra-cheap online fast fashion on one side, and toward more selective, higher-margin spending on the other. The stores that used to serve the comfortable middle ground of the market are finding there is less ground left to stand on. When 400 stores close, that is 400 spots in 400 shopping centers that go dark. And those are 400 chances for a customer to realize they don't actually need to drive to the mall anymore. That behavioral shift is what the next closure is really about, and it hits closer to home for a lot of parents. Number 9. Carter's. Carter's is not a fashion brand in the usual sense. It is the store where American parents buy onesies, where they grab toddler pajamas with little dinosaurs on them, where they pick up a baby shower gift for a coworker. For anyone who has had a young child in the past few decades, Carter's is one of those brands that just existed practical, reliable, everywhere. In 2025, the company announced plans to close approximately 150 underperforming stores over 3 years, with a large share of those closures, reportedly around 100, scheduled for 2025 and 2026. The reason Carter's gave was unusually direct: tariffs. The company explicitly cited the impact of new import tariffs on goods coming from countries where its products are manufactured. And because children's clothing is not a luxury, it is a recurring, unavoidable expense. Any increase in cost hits families in a very immediate way. Here is the twist. Carter's is a discount-adjacent, practical retailer. It should theoretically be exactly the kind of brand that survives when family budgets tighten. But what the closures reveal is that for younger American families, particularly those with children under 5, the budget pressure is coming from so many directions at once that even sensible, necessary spending is being reorganized. Online subscriptions, second-hand apps, hand-me-down networks. The way young families shop for their children is changing, and Carter's built its business around a store-first model in a generation that is increasingly store-averse. When a brand that sells children's basics starts closing 100 stores, it is not a sign that people stopped having children. It is a sign that even the most practical purchases are being renegotiated. And if that's happening to a staple like Carter's, consider what it means for a brand that built its identity entirely around a dying retail format. Number 8. Foot Locker. There was a time when the Foot Locker at your local mall was one of its anchors. The striped referee shirts, the shelves stacked with limited edition sneakers, the Saturday afternoon crowd of teenagers and parents. It was not just a shoe store, it was a ritual. According to earlier plans outlined by Foot Locker and followed through under its 2025 acquisition by Dick's Sporting Goods, approximately 400 Foot Locker stores are expected to close by the end of 2026. The focus of the cuts has reportedly been on lower-traffic mall locations, particularly stores in what the industry calls lower-tier malls, where foot traffic has dropped to levels that make brick-and-mortar retail difficult to justify. Here is what is significant about this number: 400 stores. That is not a light trim. That is a fundamental rethinking of what the brand's physical presence should look like going forward. The strategy replacing it concentrating on larger power stores and off-mall locations reflects a broader recognition that the traditional mall sneaker store, as a format, has run its course. What this means for people who live near those lower-tier malls is something the numbers tend to obscure. Those malls are often the primary commercial centers for their communities. When a Foot Locker closes, it is rarely replaced by something comparable. Often, it joins a row of empty storefronts that makes the whole center feel like it is waiting for something that is not coming. The American mall was supposed to be a democratic space, a place where everyone from every income level could browse, meet, and buy. What is left of that idea in 2026 is increasingly uneven. Speaking of things that were supposed to be permanent features of American culture, the next one is a name that has become its own kind of symbol. Number 7. GameStop. GameStop is probably the most symbolic closure on this list, and not just because of the 2021 short squeeze that turned it into a Reddit-era legend. GameStop has been closing stores steadily for years, and according to Coresight Research, it leads all retailers in the total number of planned closures in 2026. The reason is not complicated. Physical game discs are effectively gone. Consoles now download games directly. Kids don't need a strip mall store to get the latest release. And the used game trade-in business that kept GameStop relevant for years has been undercut by digital libraries, game subscriptions, and resale apps. What makes this closing worth pausing on is what GameStop actually was for a specific generation of Americans. It was where you went after school, where you argued about which console was better, where you had a weird, surprisingly long conversation with the employee behind the counter about a game that turned out to be great. It was a place that mattered, even when the business model was shaky. The closure of GameStop locations is essentially the physical confirmation of a transition that has already happened. The stores are just catching up to the reality. But there is something worth naming here. The formats that replaced it, digital downloads, subscriptions, streaming, do not replicate the social function the store served. The place where a teenager spent a Saturday afternoon is gone, and nothing has filled that specific space. Some closures are about losing a product. Some are about losing a place. GameStop is the second kind. If you find that breakdown useful, a like helps more people find it. And if any of this is happening near you, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. The next one might surprise you, because this brand's customers are the exact people who were supposed to be recession-proof. Number 6. REI is not a typical retailer. It is a consumer cooperative, owned by its members, not by shareholders. It has always positioned itself as a company with a conscience, investing in outdoor access, sustainability, and employee benefits. It was the kind of store that felt principled. That made it feel, to many of its customers, like it was protected from the pressures that hit ordinary chains. In 2026, REI confirmed the closure of 3 significant locations: its flagship store in New York City, its Boston store, and a location in Paramus, New Jersey. The New York closure in particular drew attention. It was one of the most visible REI locations in the country, in a city where outdoor recreation and fitness culture are significant markets. The company described the decisions as an adaptation to changing customer needs and markets. What that means in practice is that even a well-run, values-driven company with a loyal membership base has to answer the same question every other retailer does. Does the cost of this physical space justify what it earns? In Manhattan and Boston, where commercial rents remain among the highest in the country, the answer increasingly is no, even for a store that people genuinely love and visit. The loyalty of the customer does not always outweigh the math of the lease. REI's closures are a reminder that the forces reshaping retail in 2026 do not care about brand reputation, mission statements, or member loyalty programs. They are structural forces, and no positioning protects you completely from them. What comes next shows that structural forces reach even further than that. Number 5. Saks off 5th and Saks Fifth Avenue. If there is a closure on this list that should make you stop and reconsider your assumptions about who is being affected, it is this one. Saks Global, the parent company of both Saks Fifth Avenue and its discount outlet chain, Saks off 5th, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in early 2026. As part of that restructuring, approximately 8 Saks Fifth Avenue department stores and roughly 57 Saks off 5th locations are reportedly being closed. Saks Fifth Avenue is not a store that people associate with financial distress. It is a name that carries the weight of American luxury retail, the kind of store that appears in holiday windows on Fifth Avenue in New York, where a single bag costs more than many people's monthly rent. And yet, here is the deeper reality. The very wealthy have shifted their spending. Luxury fashion increasingly flows through private labels, direct-to-consumer brands, resale platforms, and overseas boutiques. The American luxury department store, as a physical format, has been losing its grip on its own customer base for years. The people who can afford to shop at Saks Fifth Avenue increasingly have more options and less reason to walk into a department store to find them. The Saks off 5th closures tell a parallel story. Discount luxury, the idea of getting designer goods at a markdown, was a compelling proposition for the aspirational middle class. But that customer, too, is being squeezed. Rent, groceries, insurance. The aspirational purchase has moved down the priority list. When the high end of the market is in bankruptcy and the discount version of the high end is closing 57 stores, you are looking at a consumption shift that reaches across income levels. And if you thought the luxury collapse was the most surprising item on this list, the next one goes even deeper. Number 4. Eddie Bauer. Eddie Bauer is one of the oldest American outdoor brands, founded in 1920. named after a real person, with a history that stretches back to the days when the outdoors was something you prepared for carefully, rather than branded and posted on social media. At its peak, it dressed hikers, campers, and people who simply wanted a jacket that held up. In 2026, Bauer filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and announced plans to close all of its U.S. and Canada store locations, approximately 175 stores. An auction to sell the retail operations was canceled when no buyer stepped forward, according to court filings. Unless something changes, the brand's physical retail presence is essentially finished. Here is the cruel irony. The outdoor industry has boomed over the past several years. Pandemic-era Americans rediscovered hiking, camping, and outdoor recreation in enormous numbers. Brands selling outdoor gear and clothing should have been perfectly positioned for that moment. But the outdoor market also became intensely competitive. Patagonia, The North Face, Arc'teryx, new, direct-to-consumer brands. Customers who got serious about outdoor gear found dozens of options, many of them with stronger brand identity or lower prices. Bauer, once a trailblazer, found itself caught between the legacy of its name and the expectations of a consumer who had moved on. When a brand with over 100 years of history cannot survive a boom in its own industry, it says something uncomfortable about how quickly the ground can shift beneath a name that once meant something. The next one is about something more basic than outdoor gear. It is about feeding your family. Number 3. Kroger. Kroger is one of the largest grocery chains in the United States. It is not a specialty store or a boutique brand. It is where millions of Americans buy their milk, their bread, their medication, their household basics. For many communities, it is not just a supermarket, it is the supermarket. In 2026, Kroger is carrying out an 8-month plan to close approximately 60 underperforming stores nationwide. The company has been in a period of restructuring following the collapse of its proposed merger with Albertsons, which was blocked by regulators. The closures are reported to be spread throughout 2026. 60 stores sounds like a manageable number for a chain with hundreds of locations. But the impact of grocery store closures is not distributed evenly. Kroger stores that are underperforming are often underperforming because the communities around them are lower income, have less foot traffic, or face higher operating costs due to crime or infrastructure challenges. Those are exactly the communities that can least afford to lose their primary grocery store. The term for what happens next is already part of the public vocabulary: a food desert. When the nearest full-service grocery store is no longer within reasonable distance, people's access to fresh food changes, prices go up, nutritional quality can decline. Transportation becomes a burden, especially for the elderly, the disabled, and households without reliable vehicles. A grocery store closure is one of the most concrete ways that a business decision translates directly into a public health outcome. And 2026 is producing dozens of them. The next item has been coming for a long time. But that does not make its arrival any less significant. Number 2, Macy's. There was a point in American life when a Macy's at the center of a mall meant that the mall mattered. The department store was the anchor, the reason people drove from 20 miles away, the reason smaller shops paid premium rents to be nearby, the reason a Saturday afternoon felt like it had a destination. Macy's has been closing stores for years as part of what the company calls its Bold New Chapter strategy, a plan that reportedly involves shuttering up to 150 underperforming locations through 2026, while investing in a smaller number of renovated, higher-performing stores. In January 2025, the company confirmed the closure of 66 non-go-forward locations, and that process has continued through 2026. The story of Macy's is the story of what happened when the anchor lost its anchor. Malls were built on a model where the department store drew people in and everything around it benefited. When Macy's closes, the smaller stores around it face a choice. Hope that foot traffic recovers, renegotiate their leases, or leave. Many leave. And then the center begins to hollow out. The question that Macy's closures raise is not just about the company. It is about what replaces the anchor tenant in the American commercial landscape. Sometimes it is a fitness center. Sometimes it is a distribution center for an e-commerce company. Sometimes it is nothing, and the space sits empty for years, a reminder of what used to be there. The communities that built their shopping patterns around those stores, particularly smaller cities and suburbs, where Macy's was sometimes the only department store, are left reorganizing around a center that no longer has a center. And now, number 1. This is the closure with the most direct daily impact on the most people. Number 1. Walgreens. Walgreens is where millions of Americans pick up their prescriptions, not occasionally monthly, weekly, sometimes more. It is where they get flu shots, where they grab cold medicine at 11 at night, where they talk to a pharmacist who actually knows their medication history. For many people, especially seniors and those managing chronic conditions, Walgreens is not a store. It is part of their healthcare routine. The background here is significant. Walgreens announced plans in 2024 to close approximately 1,200 stores over a 3-year period, with roughly 500 closures reportedly occurring in fiscal year 2025 alone. The company was then taken private in a deal with the private equity firm Sycamore Partners, reportedly valued at around $10 billion, completed in late 2025. Under new private ownership, the closure pace was reportedly scaled back, with Walgreens reportedly confirming that fewer than 100 stores would close in 2026, a significant reduction from earlier projections. But even with that adjustment, the cumulative impact of Walgreens' contraction over the past 2 years is large. Hundreds of locations have already closed. The communities that feel it most are not the ones where another pharmacy is a 5-minute drive away. They are the communities where Walgreens was the only option within reasonable distance, and where its closure creates what is now being called a pharmacy desert. A pharmacy desert is not just an inconvenience. When a pharmacy closes, some patients miss doses. Some delay picking up medications because they cannot easily get to a new location. Some seniors who were walking to their corner Walgreens now need a ride. The downstream effects of pharmacy closures on public health are real, measurable, and largely invisible in the headlines. What makes Walgreens land at number 1 is not the scale of closures in 2026, it is the category. A sneaker store closing affects how you shop. A grocery store closing affects how you eat. A pharmacy closing affects how you manage your health. That is a different order of consequence. And the story underneath Walgreens, the combination of falling prescription reimbursements, competition from online pharmacies, and the arrival of private equity cost-cutting, is the kind of story that rarely ends with fewer closures. Closing. Walk through this list, and you can see how different these 10 situations really are. Francesca's failed in the middle of the market. Carter's is being squeezed by tariffs. Foot Locker is retreating from dying malls. GameStop completed a digital migration that was always coming. REI is grappling with commercial real estate math. Saks Global collapsed under the weight of luxury debt. Bauer could not find its footing in a crowded market. Kroger is trimming the edges of its footprint. Macy's is dismantling its anchor role store by store. Walgreens is being re-engineered under private equity ownership. 10 different situations. But look at what is running underneath all of them. Consumers who are more cautious. Operating costs that have risen significantly. E-commerce that has permanently taken a share of spending that used to go to physical stores. Supply chains disrupted by tariffs that raise the cost of goods. Leases that were signed in a different economic era. And a physical retail infrastructure that was built for a version of American consumer behavior that no longer fully exists. The other thing worth saying clearly, these closures do not land the same way across the country. A Macy's closing in a city with 3 other department stores is a disruption. A Macy's closing in a smaller city where it was the only one is a loss that reshapes the entire commercial character of a downtown. A Kroger closing near a suburban area with 5 other supermarkets nearby is a mild inconvenience. A Kroger closing in a rural county where it was the main full-service grocery is a food access crisis. The closures are national. The consequences are local. And in a lot of the places that will feel this most, the replacements are slow to come, or they don't come at all. Which of these 10 surprised you the most? And have you seen any of these changes happening in your own community? A store gone dark? A pharmacy that isn't there anymore? A mall that has gotten a little quieter? Let me know in the comments below. That kind of ground-level view matters more than any analyst report.